Stephen Miller walked into that congressional hearing room confident he was about to destroy Jasmine Crockett on live television. He had his talking points ready, his attacks prepared, and that signature smirk that told you he knew something you didn't. But Miller had no idea that Congresswoman Crockett had been sitting on explosive information about his personal life for weeks. Information that involved Elon Musk, his wife Katie, and photos that would end his career in less than 60 seconds. If you want to see how one perfectly timed question can destroy a political career and expose the biggest scandal in Washington, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story gets absolutely insane. The moment happened at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, broadcast live to millions of C-SPAN viewers. Miller leaned into his microphone, ready to deliver what he thought would be a career-ending blow to Crockett. Instead, she looked directly into his eyes, smiled that knowing smile that would become legendary, and uttered 6 words that made his face go completely white. "Stephen, how's Katie enjoying Austin lately?" The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, you could watch Stephen Miller's entire world collapse in real time. His mouth opened slightly. His hands gripped the table. Someone in the press gallery whispered, "Oh my God." And Jasmine Crockett just sat there, calm as could be, waiting for his response because she knew what everyone was about to find out. She knew about the photos. She knew about the secret meetings. She knew about Elon Musk and Katie Miller's months-long affair that had been hidden from everyone except the people who mattered most. What happened next would become the most viral political moment of the year, destroy Miller's reputation forever, and turn Jasmine Crockett into a legend. But first, you need to understand how we got here. To understand why this moment was so devastating, you need to know who these people really are and why they've been at war for years. Stephen Miller isn't just any political advisor. He's the guy who built his entire career on being smarter than everyone else in the room. For decades, he's been a mastermind behind some of the most brutal political takedowns in modern history. He doesn't just win arguments. He destroys people completely, permanently. Miller's specialty is finding your weakness and exploiting it in front of the largest possible audience. He's the kind of man who researches your family, your finances, and your personal life, looking for anything he can use to humiliate you when it matters most. And he's very, very good at it. His wife, Katie, has been his perfect political partner for 8 years. She's smart, connected, and knows how to play the Washington game. Together, they've been an unstoppable power couple until now. On the other side, you have Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. If Miller is a chess master, Crockett is a master detective. She's a former defense attorney who never lost a case because she never walked into court without knowing every single fact that mattered. She doesn't make accusations she can't prove. She doesn't throw punches she can't land. And she never, ever bluffs. For 3 years, Miller and Crockett have been circling each other like predators. It started during a heated immigration debate in Phoenix, where Crockett called Miller's policies government-sanctioned cruelty on live television. Miller didn't appreciate being embarrassed by someone he saw as beneath him. Since then, he'd made it his personal mission to destroy her career. He showed up at her speaking events. He sent late-night emails to her office demanding information she'd already provided. He'd even been spotted in the audience during her committee hearings, just watching, waiting for his moment to strike. Miller thought that moment had finally come. The Judiciary Committee had called a special hearing on asylum processing, and Miller was scheduled to question Crockett about her voting record. He'd been preparing for weeks, studying every interview she'd ever given, looking for contradictions he could exploit. What he didn't know was that Crockett had been preparing, too, not for his questions about policy, but for the moment when she would finally reveal what she learned about his marriage. 3 weeks earlier, Crockett had received a text message that changed everything. It was from her college friend, Ayanna, who now worked as a venture capitalist in Austin. The message was simple. "Girl, you're not going to believe who I just saw Elon with." The photos that followed would expose the biggest political scandal of the year. But they would also give Jasmine Crockett the one thing she needed to end Stephen Miller's career forever: the truth. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about hypocrisy. This was about a man who'd built his career destroying other people's lives while hiding his own secrets. And Jasmine Crockett was about to make sure the whole world knew it. The story really begins 3 weeks before the hearing at an exclusive SpaceX donor event in Austin, Texas. It was the kind of party where you needed to donate at least $5 million just to get through the door. Elon Musk was holding court on the rooftop of the Lauren Hotel, discussing the future of space exploration with some of the wealthiest people in America. The guest list was strictly private. No press, no cameras, no social media posts allowed. That's why nobody expected to see Katie Miller there alone. Katie had flown in from Washington that morning, telling Stephen she was visiting her sister in Dallas. But instead of heading to Dallas, she drove straight to Austin and walked into that party wearing a stunning black dress that definitely wasn't picked out for a family visit. Ayanna Blackwell spotted her almost immediately. As a venture capitalist, Ayanna knew all the major political players, and Katie Miller definitely stood out in a crowd of tech billionaires. But what really caught Ayanna's attention was how Katie and Elon were acting around each other. This wasn't casual conversation between strangers. They were laughing at inside jokes, touching each other's arms while they talked, standing just a little too close for two people who'd supposedly just met. Ayanna pulled out her phone and took 2 quick photos from across the rooftop. In the first, you can see Elon leaning in close to Katie's ear, whispering something that made her throw her head back, laughing. In the second, Katie's hand is resting on Elon's chest while he looks down at her with an expression that definitely isn't appropriate for a married woman. The next morning, Ayanna sent those photos to Jasmine with a message. This was supposed to be a secret, but I thought you should know. Jasmine stared at those photos for a long time. She recognized Katie Miller immediately. They'd been introduced at several Washington events over the years. But seeing her in Austin acting intimate with Elon Musk while her husband was back in D.C. was something entirely different. Most politicians would have immediately leaked those photos to the press or used them to attack Miller publicly. But Jasmine Crockett is smarter than that. She understood that information is only powerful if you use it at exactly the right moment. So instead of going public, she made some phone calls. Quiet calls to people she trusted, a reporter at The Hill who owed her a favor, a blogger who covered Washington gossip, a few staffers who worked in different offices but always knew what was happening behind the scenes. She didn't share the photos. She just asked innocent questions. Have you heard anything about Katie Miller lately? Anyone know why she was in Texas last week? Seen any interesting couples around town? Within 48 hours, whispers were spreading through Washington like wildfire. People started paying attention to Katie's social media posts. They noticed she hadn't been seen at any public events with Stephen recently. Someone spotted her getting coffee alone near Capitol Hill when she was supposed to be out of town. The rumor mill was churning, but nobody had proof. Nobody except Jasmine Crockett. Meanwhile, Stephen Miller was completely oblivious. He was too busy preparing for what he thought would be his moment of triumph, the congressional hearing where he would finally destroy Jasmine Crockett's career. He spent hours reviewing her voting record, looking for inconsistencies. He practiced his questions in front of a mirror, perfecting his tone of voice to sound both authoritative and condescending. He even consulted with a media coach to make sure he looked good on camera. Miller was so focused on his planned attack that he never noticed the subtle changes around him. He didn't see the way other political insiders stopped making eye contact with him at events. He didn't catch the whispered conversations that stopped whenever he walked into a room. He definitely didn't notice that his wife had been acting distant and distracted for weeks. The morning of the hearing, Miller woke up feeling more confident than he had in months. He put on his best suit, practiced his opening statement one more time, and headed to Capitol Hill, ready for war. Katie wasn't there to wish him luck. She was, according to her text message, dealing with a family emergency back in Austin. Miller didn't think twice about it. As he walked into that hearing room, Miller truly believed he was about to have the best day of his political career. He had no idea that Jasmine Crockett was sitting at her table with information that would end his marriage, destroy his reputation, and make him a laughingstock across the entire country. The committee room was packed with reporters, cameras, and political insiders who sensed something big was about to happen. The tension was electric, but Miller interpreted it as anticipation for his performance. He took his seat, shuffled his papers confidently, and looked across the table at Jasmine Crockett with the kind of smirk that said he knew exactly how this was going to end. He was right about that. He just had no idea who was going to be left standing when it was over. The hearing started exactly like Stephen Miller planned. The committee chairman called for order, announced a topic, asylum processing delays, and gave Miller permission to begin his questioning. Miller leaned into his microphone with that trademark confidence and started his attack. Congresswoman Crockett, your voting record shows a consistent pattern of prioritizing political theater over practical solutions. Can you explain to the American people why you continue to support policies that have directly led to increased border chaos? It was a typical Miller opening, aggressive, loaded with assumptions, and designed to put his opponent on the defensive immediately. In the past, this strategy had worked perfectly. Politicians would get flustered, start explaining themselves, and walk right into his traps. But Jasmine Crockett didn't take the bait. She looked directly at Miller, tilted her head slightly, and said, "Stephen, I'd be happy to discuss policy with someone who's actually focused on policy instead of personal drama. But are you sure you want to have that conversation today?" Miller's eyes narrowed. That wasn't the response he'd prepared for. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Congresswoman, but I think the American people deserve answers about your failed immigration agenda." "Oh, I'm not implying anything," Crockett replied, her voice getting just a little sharper. "I'm directly asking if you're mentally present enough for a serious policy discussion, or if you're distracted by other things happening in your life right now." You could feel the room shift. The reporters in the back started paying closer attention. Committee members looked up from their phones. Even the C-SPAN cameras seemed to focus more intently. Miller forced a laugh. "I'm not sure what game you're playing, but I'm here to discuss your record on immigration enforcement. Unless you're planning to deflect from your failures by making this personal." That's when Jasmine Crockett smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, knowing curve at the corner of her mouth that somehow managed to fill the entire room with tension. "Stephen," she said, her voice calm and controlled, "how's Katie enjoying Austin lately?" The silence that followed was deafening. Miller's face went from confident to confused to absolutely pale in about 3 seconds. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Someone in the press gallery whispered, "Oh shit," loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "I'm sorry." "What?" Miller finally managed to stammer. "Austin, Texas," Crockett continued, her voice never changing tone. "Your wife has been spending a lot of time there recently. I was just wondering how she's finding it. The weather, the company, the private events, you know?" Miller's hands were gripping the edge of the table, so tight his knuckles were white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" Crockett raised an eyebrow. "Because I have some friends in Austin who mentioned seeing her at a SpaceX event last week. Very exclusive gathering. Very intimate atmosphere. She seemed to be having a wonderful time with Elon Musk." The room erupted. Not loudly, but you could feel the energy change completely. Phones started buzzing. Reporters began typing frantically. Committee members exchanged shocked glances. Miller tried to recover. "This is completely inappropriate. We're here to discuss policy, not engage in gossip and innuendo." "Oh, this isn't gossip," Crockett said, pulling out her phone. "This is documentation. Would you like me to show everyone the photos, or would you prefer to answer some questions about border security instead?" That's when Stephen Miller completely lost it. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is a congressional hearing, not some tabloid show. You can't just make accusations without evidence." "I'm not making accusations," Crockett replied calmly. "I'm asking about your wife's travel schedule. But if you'd prefer to discuss evidence," she held up her phone, and even though nobody could see the screen clearly, everyone in the room knew exactly what she was threatening to reveal. Miller stood up so fast he knocked over his water glass. "This is harassment. This is a coordinated attack. I demand the chairman put a stop to this character assassination." But the committee chairman, who had been watching this unfold with barely concealed amazement, just shrugged. "Mr. Miller, Congresswoman Crockett asked you a simple question about your family. If you don't want to answer, you're free to return to your prepared questions about immigration policy." Miller looked around the room desperately. Every camera was focused on him. Every reporter was taking notes. Even his own staff members were staring at him with expressions of pure horror. This is, you can't." Miller stuttered completely, unable to form a coherent sentence. "Stephen," Crockett said, her voice now filled with something that sounded almost like sympathy. "Maybe we should take a break. Give you some time to call your wife. Check in on how she's doing in Austin. Make sure she's safe." Miller's face went from pale to bright red. "How dare you? My marriage is none of your business." "You're absolutely right," Crockett nodded. "Your marriage isn't my business. But when someone builds their entire career on attacking other people's personal lives, their family values, their private choices, and then their own family starts making very public choices, well, that becomes everyone's business, doesn't it?" The room fell completely silent. Miller stood there, shaking with rage, unable to respond because everyone knew she was absolutely right. For years, Miller had built his reputation on exposing other people's secrets, attacking their families, questioning their personal choices. He'd made a career out of turning private matters into public scandals. And now Jasmine Crockett had just given him a taste of his own medicine. "I think," she said quietly, "we should probably end this hearing so you can handle your personal affairs. Unless you'd like to continue discussing asylum processing policies while your wife is processing her own situation in Austin." Miller grabbed his papers, stuffed them into his briefcase, and stormed out of the room without another word. The committee chairman called for a recess, but nobody was paying attention to procedure anymore. The damage was done. In less than 10 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had completely destroyed Stephen Miller's reputation, exposed his biggest secret, and turned him into a national laughingstock, all while never raising her voice, never losing her composure, and never saying anything that wasn't absolutely true. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. Within 30 minutes of Miller storming out of that hearing room, #MillerMeltdown was trending on Twitter. Within an hour, the video clip had been viewed over 2 million times. By the end of the day, it was the most watched political moment of the year. But the real story was just beginning. At 4:15 p.m., barely 2 hours after the hearing ended, TMZ published an exclusive story with a headline, "Political Power Couple in Crisis. Stephen Miller's wife spotted getting cozy with Elon Musk in Austin." The story included the photos Ayanna had taken, plus several more from different angles that showed Katie and Elon looking very much like a couple. By 6 p.m., every major news network was covering the story. CNN ran a segment called Marriage Politics and Public Meltdowns. Fox News tried to spin it as an attack on conservative family values, but even their hosts couldn't hide their shock at Miller's complete breakdown on live television. MSNBC brought in body language experts to analyze Miller's reaction. You can see the exact moment when he realizes his career is over. One expert explained while replaying the clip in slow motion. The way his hands shake, the way his voice cracks. This is a man who knows he's been completely exposed. Social media was absolutely brutal. TikTok creators were making videos using Miller's "How dare you" outburst as comedy gold. Instagram memes compared his meltdown to famous political scandals throughout history. Reddit users were analyzing every frame of the hearing footage, pointing out all the moments when Miller's composure completely cracked. But the most damaging coverage came from political insiders who had worked with Miller for years. One former colleague told Politico, "Stephen's entire brand was based on being the smartest, most prepared person in any room. Watching him get completely outmaneuvered by Crockett like that, it destroys everything he's built his reputation on." Another Washington insider was even more blunt. "Miller made a career out of destroying people with their personal secrets. Now everyone knows his biggest secret, and he handled it like an amateur. He's done." The conservative movement that had supported Miller for years began distancing themselves immediately. The Heritage Foundation quietly removed his bio from their website. The American Enterprise Institute canceled his upcoming speaking engagement. Even Tucker Carlson, who had been one of Miller's biggest supporters, refused to have him on his show. Meanwhile, Katie Miller's silence was deafening. She didn't return calls from reporters. She didn't post anything on social media. She didn't issue any statements through representatives. She simply disappeared. But Elon Musk, he posted a single tweet at 11:47 p.m. that night. "Life is complicated. Truth is simple." It got 3.2 million likes and 800,000 retweets. By the next morning, the story had evolved beyond just a political scandal. It became a cultural moment about hypocrisy, power, and accountability. Women across the country were sharing clips of Crockett's performance with captions like, "This is how you handle a bully," and "Watch her destroy him without even raising her voice." Young political staffers were analyzing her strategy, trying to understand how she had so perfectly controlled the narrative. But perhaps the most significant reaction came from other politicians who had been targeted by Miller over the years. Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeted, "Sometimes karma has perfect timing." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posted, "Fascinating to watch someone finally get held accountable for their own tactics." 3 days after the hearing, the Washington Post published a lengthy investigation into Miller's career, documenting all the times he had used personal attacks and family scandals to destroy his political opponents. The headline read, "The Miller Method: How a Political Hitman Finally Met His Match." The article included interviews with dozens of politicians, staffers, and journalists who had been targeted by Miller's tactics over the years. One recurring theme emerged: Miller's complete inability to handle having his own methods used against him. He could dish it out, but he absolutely could not take it. One former congressman told the Post, "The moment someone turned his own playbook against him, he completely fell apart." A week later, Miller's consulting firm lost its 3 biggest clients. His book deal was canceled. His regular appearances on cable news shows were indefinitely suspended. The think tank where he held a senior fellowship announced they were restructuring their personnel. Political speak for, "We're firing him, but try and be polite about it." Katie Miller, meanwhile, was spotted having dinner with Elon Musk at an exclusive restaurant in Los Angeles. When photographers tried to approach their table, Musk's security team made it clear that questions were not welcome. But the photos spoke for themselves. Katie looked happier and more relaxed than she had in any public appearance in years. 2 weeks after the hearing, divorce papers were filed in Washington, D.C. Superior Court. Katie Miller was seeking a dissolution of her 8-year marriage to Stephen Miller, citing irreconcilable differences. She was also requesting half of their considerable assets and ownership of their Georgetown townhouse. Miller's response was filed 3 days later. In addition to contesting the financial demands, his legal team made an unusual request. They asked the court to seal all proceedings and prevent either party from discussing the case publicly. It was a final admission of just how completely Jasmine Crockett had destroyed him. The man who had built his career on exposing other people's private business was now desperately trying to keep his own private business out of the headlines. But it was too late. The damage was permanent and total. But the story gets even more interesting when you look at what happened behind closed doors in the weeks following Miller's meltdown. 3 days after the hearing, Jasmine Crockett received an unexpected visitor at her Capitol Hill office. At 7:30 p.m., long after most staffers had gone home, her secretary buzzed her with a message that made her pause. "Ma'am, Elon Musk is here to see you. No appointment, no security detail. He says it's personal." Crockett had dealt with enough surprise visits from powerful men trying to intimidate her, but something about this felt different. "Send him in," she said. Elon walked into her office wearing jeans and a simple black t-shirt, not exactly the typical uniform for meetings on Capitol Hill. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept properly in days. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, extending his hand. "I think we need to talk." "Mr. Musk," she replied, not standing up from behind her desk. "I assume this is about Katie." Elon nodded and took the seat across from her, without being invited. "I want you to know that what happened between Katie and me, it wasn't planned. It wasn't some scheme to embarrass Stephen Miller or create a political scandal." Crockett studied his face carefully. After years of reading people in courtrooms and congressional hearings, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to detect lies. Elon, she realized, was telling the truth. "I believe you," she said. "But that doesn't change what happened in that hearing room." "No, it doesn't," Elon agreed. "And honestly, after watching that footage, I'm not sure I feel bad about it. Stephen Miller has spent years destroying people's lives with their personal information. Maybe it's time someone gave him a taste of his own medicine." What Elon told her next would never make it into any official record, but revealed just how deeply Miller's tactics had affected the political landscape in Washington. 3 years ago, Elon explained, Miller tried to destroy a renewable energy bill I was supporting by leaking private text messages between me and a senator's wife. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversations about policy. But Miller twisted them to make it look like I was buying political influence through personal relationships. Crockett leaned forward. This was the first time she'd heard this story. The bill died, Elon continued, not because of the policy, but because of the scandal Miller manufactured. That legislation could have created hundreds of thousands of jobs and accelerated America's transition to clean energy by 5 years. But Miller killed it to score political points. And you never responded publicly. I tried to take the high road. Elon shrugged. Big mistake. Miller saw that as weakness, and he's been targeting me ever since. Every business decision, every Twitter post, every relationship, he's had people watching, looking for ammunition. Crockett sat back in her chair, processing this information. So, when Katie reached out to you, she was trying to get away from all of that. She told me she was tired of being married to someone who saw every human interaction as a potential weapon, Elon said. She wanted to be around people who create things instead of just destroying them. The conversation continued for over an hour. Elon revealed details about Miller's behind-the-scenes operations that even Crockett hadn't known. The opposition research firms he hired to dig into his enemies' personal lives, the private investigators who followed politicians' family members, the network of gossip bloggers and social media accounts he used to spread damaging information. Stephen Miller turned politics into a blood sport. Elon said as he prepared to leave, "What you did in that hearing room wasn't cruel. It was justice." But the most revealing moment came when Crockett asked why he was really there. "Because I wanted to make sure you understand something," Elon said. "What you did took incredible courage. Most politicians would have either ignored the information about Katie and me, or they would leak it anonymously to hurt Miller, without taking any personal risk. But you looked him in the eye and held him accountable face to face. That's rare in this town." After Elon left, Crockett sat in her office, thinking about their conversation. She realized that Miller's downfall wasn't just about one scandal or one affair. It was about years of accumulated karma finally catching up with someone who had made too many enemies and hurt too many people. The next morning, she received a call that confirmed just how far Miller's influence had reached. Senator Amy Klobuchar was on the line, and she sounded relieved. "Jasmine, I need to thank you for what you did," Klobuchar said. "I don't know if you know this, but Miller has been trying to dig up dirt on my family for 2 years, ever since I criticized his border policies. He's had people looking into my husband's business dealings, my daughter's college application essays, even my elderly mother's medical records." Crockett was shocked. "Amy, why didn't you ever say anything publicly?" "Because I was afraid," Klobuchar admitted. "Miller has this reputation for being untouchable. People were scared to cross him because he always seemed to have something on everyone. But watching him completely fall apart on live television, it's like you broke some kind of spell." Over the next few days, Crockett received similar calls from other politicians, representatives who had been targeted by Miller's opposition research, senators who had changed their votes on important legislation because they were afraid of what Miller might reveal about their personal lives, governors who had avoided taking positions on controversial issues because they knew Miller was watching, waiting for any excuse to attack. The picture that emerged was deeply disturbing. Miller hadn't just been a political operative. He had been running something close to a protection racket, using fear and intimidation to control the political process. He was like a political mob boss. One congressman told her off the record. Everyone knew what he was doing, but nobody wanted to be the one to challenge him directly. You changed that. A month after the hearing, Jasmine Crockett was invited to speak at Harvard Law School about political strategy and communication. During the Q&A session, a student asked her about that famous moment when she destroyed Miller's career. "I didn't destroy Stephen Miller," she said calmly. "Stephen Miller destroyed Stephen Miller. I just made sure people could see it happening." When pressed for more details about her strategy, Crockett smiled, the same knowing smile that had launched 1,000 memes. "The most powerful weapon in politics isn't what you say, she explained. It's knowing when to say it. Stephen Miller spent years using people's secrets against him. He just never considered that other people might have secrets about him. 2. The audience erupted in applause, but Crockett wasn't finished. Here's what everyone should understand about power, she continued. It's not about who can shout the loudest or hit the hardest. Real power comes from preparation, patience, and understanding that the truth always wins in the end. Stephen Miller forgot that lesson, and it cost him everything. But then, a graduate student in the back row asked a question that made the entire auditorium go silent. Congresswoman, do you think what you did was ethical? Using someone's personal life to destroy their career. Crockett paused for a long moment before answering. That's an excellent question, and it's one I've thought about a lot since that hearing. Let me be very clear about something. I didn't leak those photos. I didn't manufacture that scandal. I didn't force Stephen Miller to have a public meltdown on live television. She walked closer to the student who had asked the question. What I did was hold a mirror up to someone who had built his entire career on using other people's personal lives as weapons. For years, Miller attacked politicians' families, their marriages, their children, their private struggles. He turned personal pain into political ammunition, and he did it without any regard for the human cost. The room was completely silent now, so when I had information about his personal life, I had a choice. I could take the high road and ignore it, which would have allowed him to continue, hurting other people, or I could show him exactly what it feels like to have your private business become public ammunition. She paused, looking around the room. I chose to hold him accountable using his own methods. And yes, it destroyed his career, but it also freed dozens of other politicians from the fear he had been using to control them. Sometimes the most ethical thing you can do is show a bully exactly what it feels like to be bullied. The applause that followed was thunderous. But more importantly, Crockett could see in the faces of the students that she had taught them something crucial about power, accountability, and the sometimes messy nature of political justice. Later that evening at a private dinner with Harvard faculty members, one professor asked her what she planned to do next. The same thing I've always done, Crockett replied. My job, fight for my constituents. Work on legislation that actually helps people and make sure that bullies like Stephen Miller understand that their tactics have consequences. But you've become a national figure now, the professor pressed. There are already rumors about presidential campaigns, Senate runs, even cabinet positions in future administrations. Crockett smiled. Power isn't about titles or positions. It's about using whatever platform you have to make positive change. Whether that's from a congressional office, a Senate seat, or somewhere else entirely doesn't matter to me. What matters is that Stephen Miller's era of political terrorism is over, and everyone who comes after him knows that their actions have consequences. 6 months later, Stephen Miller was working as a mid-level consultant for a small lobbying firm in Virginia, making a fraction of his previous salary, and struggling to rebuild a reputation that might never recover. Katie Miller and Elon Musk made their relationship officially public with a joint appearance at a charity gala in Miami. They looked genuinely happy together, and sources close to both confirmed they were discussing long-term plans. And Jasmine Crockett. She was nominated for Time magazine's Person of the Year for redefining political discourse and demonstrating that intelligence and preparation can triumph over aggression and intimidation. She didn't win the award, but she didn't need to. She had already won something much more valuable: the respect of everyone who had ever been bullied, intimidated, or attacked by people like Stephen Miller. Because sometimes the most important victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's showing everyone else that your enemy can be defeated. If this story showed you why strategic thinking beats aggressive tactics every single time, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible political breakdowns. And let me know in the comments what was your favorite moment from Jasmine Crockett's masterclass in political warfare. Was it the initial question that made Miller's face go white? The moment he completely lost control? Or the way she never had to raise her voice to completely destroy him? Drop your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next video where we break down even more shocking political moments that changed everything. The lesson here isn't just about one hearing or one scandal. It's about what happens when preparation meets opportunity, when patience defeats aggression, and when someone who spent their career attacking others finally faces someone who refuses to be intimidated. In a world where political discourse seems to get uglier and more personal every day, Jasmine Crockett reminded everyone that sometimes the most devastating response to aggression is simply telling the truth at exactly the right moment. And that truth can be more powerful than any insult, more effective than any attack, and more permanent than any scandal. Stephen Miller learned that lesson the hard way. The question is, who's going to learn it next?